Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm one of your hosts, Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann, and I am thrilled and I have nothing to say. I am just, in awe of today's guest. Please help us welcome Sid Krofft. Sid, thank you so much for joining us today.
What a great introduction. Thank you.
Sid, I mean, you created so many shows of my childhood. Before we get started, just, everything, my childhood is associated with your shows. It's just, I grew up on everything that you've done. And I don't even know which one I love the most. It's
Well, thank you. It's amazing to me, after all these years, how all of you have taken this with you. There are not many shows out there, especially children's shows, that you can still sing the theme song and all the characters' names, and that blows me away. Hey, thank you for that.
Well, let's get started. I mean, I was reading so much about you there, and you started to ask you, your father was an entertainer as well. I read, what type of act did he have, and how did he get you into a love of performing?
I don't know where the hell you read that, but because that is not the way. I mean, why do people make up stories? Maybe I did, but no, my dad, the first time I ever saw a puppet, I was 9 years old, and my dad got a free ticket, only one ticket, to go see a stage show. And this was in Providence, Rhode Island. And the theater was called the Phase Theater. It was vaudeville. And he asked this couple, it was a matinee, to take me into the theater. And I sat next to them. The curtain went up, and it was the Megalyn Kitties. Did you ever hear of them?
No.
It was this woman here in Hollywood that found Shirley Temple and Mickey Rooney and all those kids that, the Our Gang comedy.
Wow.
and the Little Rascals. And she had a big show of all children that age, no taller than the piano. And they put on this, and even the orchestra was all kids. And they traveled, of course they played in Hollywood, but they traveled and played for a week in different vaudeville theaters all over the country. So I saw the Megalyn Kitties. I don't think Shirley Temple was in it when I saw it. But after the opening number, which it was a big tap number coming down this grand staircase, and sparks came from their shoes.
Wow.
The tap dancers. To this day, nobody can figure out how they did that. And then the stage went dark, and there was a little suitcase laying flat in the middle of the stage, and the spotlight just hit that. I didn't see the puppeteer, but he didn't work in a stage. He was exposed, but you just saw an outline of a small body operating this puppet. The suitcase opened up, a clown came out, peeked out, and he got on top of the suitcase, and there was music, of course, behind it. It was all silent. The clown wasn't singing or speaking. And I never saw a marionette before. So to me, it was like a little real person. And it blew up a balloon, and the balloon broke, and he became so sad, the clown, that I began to cry.
Wow.
The whole audience screamed for me to shut up, that I was spoiling the show. The ushers came down and asked the people next to me, "Is this your kid?" You know, or tell your kid to be quiet or whatever they said. They said, "No, he's not with us." So they threw me out of the theater.
Oh, wow.
Now, this story has something to do with your first question. There was a little kid on our street that had the very first comic book, Superman comic book,
Oh.
that we used to look at every single day. In that comic book was an ad for a hazel marionette, $3.95. I went to my dad, no show business background, oh, not at all. And I asked him if I could get it. And he became furious with me because he said, first of all, you're a boy and you want a dolly? And he said, and $3.95 would feed your family for weeks. This is 1940, actually. And so I also saw an ad in that comic book. Of course, he didn't get it for me. And if you sent away for a box of Christmas cards, 100 in a box, and you sold them for 50 cents, you could keep a nickel. So without telling my parents, I sent away. And after school, I was out in the streets selling my Christmas cards, saving for my $3.95, which probably took me months. You know, I still have that marionette, and her name is Dolly.
Wow.
And the reason I sent away for Dolly is because I wasn't a little brat, but when my parents said to me, "Don't jump off that hill, you'll get hurt," I would jump. I was that kind of a kid. So, and that's how it all started. No, my dad, after he saw I was making money with my marionettes, $1, $2, because I became a street performer with that puppet selling Christmas cards. I used to make 75 cents, $1 a day, because I was, hundreds of people would gather. I had a little Victrola that I wound up. So that's how it all started. So whoever wrote that, instead of me suing you for, for what we talked about, what was behind you,
The background, right?
from Land of the Lost. I mean, that guy, whoever wrote that article.
Well, now I'm worried about the rest of the questions.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry that I took so long on just that one question, but
I'm worried about this. Let me. So now, did you open for Judy Garland?
Oh yeah,
okay. Hey.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 1957 at the Flamingo Hotel in Vegas, when there were probably 5 or 6 hotels in Vegas.
Wow.
Now who knows? We can't count how many hotels there are now. Yeah.
So what was that like? What was that experience like? I mean, a kid working, in front of.
Well, I wasn't. I was. Come on, I wasn't a kid anymore.
You're older, but
yeah, I was older. Yeah.
But a legendary performer like that.
No, yeah, but my act toured the whole world, and I just got back from the Lido in Paris. I was in that show for a year.
Wow.
And you know, then I toured all of Europe after that. So I was away in the early 50s for many, many years. And Jack Benny saw me in a show in London, and he wanted me to come back to America to do his special. It was called The Shower of Stars, an hour special. And he wanted one of my marionettes. He had an idea because he had Jacques D'Amboise, who was the premier dancer of the New York City Ballet, to dance with that marionette and do lifts. So I worked off bridges. Are you guys puppeteers?
No, not me. I don't know if Ike does that at all.
Really? Well,
I'm s-
what's your entrance? Now I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Well, what is your entrance into show business?
Well,
Mine.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I am going to back up even before my entrance into show business, because I have a story related to HR Pufnstuf that is
Wow.
profound for me. It was I was more than enamored with that show. I was a bit obsessed with it. I watched it constantly. I loved it and adored it. And I wanted to be Jimmy. I wanted my own magic flute. I wanted to live in that world so badly. And I my father was actually in the entertainment industry. He had his own children's show actually in Houston, Texas. It was a live show, and he actually operated a puppet and showed cartoons and did all kinds of kind of variety entertainment. And he wanted to take his career to the next level. So my whole family moved out to Los Angeles in 1969, and I was quite a ways away. I was in third grade at the time, and I was quite a ways away from, not about a year away from when I was going to actually enter the business myself. But I had a huge dream of wanting to be part of movies and TV. And I had developed this very odd rivalry with a schoolmate in third grade. His name was Nigel. I don't remember his last name, but I remember his name, Nigel. And Nigel insisted that he was going to get into the entertainment industry before I was. And I said, no, I'm going to get into it before you are. And this went on for quite a number of weeks. And I finally decided it's never going to happen for me. I don't know how it's going to happen. So I'm just going to lie. And I told Nigel I got on television, and the show that I was on, he could watch every Saturday. It was HR Pufnstuf. And he got all upset and said, I watched that show. You're not on that show. There's only one boy on it. So how could you possibly be on it? And I had my entire scenario worked out in my head. I said, well, I play Clang, so I'm in a suit. That's why you can't tell it's me. And he bought it.
But Kling and Clang, they were little tiny people. You know?
Well, hey, my story worked. He bought it and believed it, and I thought, good, and then all of a sudden I realized, man, I lied about this completely. I have nothing to do with this show. What's going to happen after this? And literally about a year later, my father turned to me and asked me if I wanted to be in television commercials, because everyone in the industry where we lived, if they were in the industry, they put their kids in the industry. So I ended up starting out in commercials, and it all kind of snowballed from there over time. So yeah.
Well, the first movie I saw in 1939, opening day, was The Wizard of Oz. And the same thing, you know, I never saw a world like that. I knew I wanted to be in that world, and I knew I was too tall to be a munchkin. but I knew I couldn't act because I was a very shy kid. You know, I was living in my own world, my own fantasy world. And as a matter of fact, the neighbors that lived above us, they didn't have any kids, and they sort of adopted me, and they loved that I always lived, like I just said, in this world of fantasy that, you know, I made up all these crazy stories about, you know, the trees, and I knew that everything was living. That's where the idea for Living Island came from,
Wow.
you know, because I love plants and animals, and, you know, I'm just in love with life.
Nature and like, sure.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
No, here's now I'll go on. I've read also that this I didn't know that you worked with the Banana Splits program. So, and then from there you got your own show. That's where that's where I read HR Pufnstuf sprang after that.
Well, let me tell you how the Banana Splits. We had shows in all the Six Flag parks, puppet shows.
Like,
They were huge productions in a theater that sat 1,200 people, and we did 9 to 12 shows a day. It was 25 minutes, and it became the #1 attraction at all the Six Flag parks because it was like an acid trip for the kids. You know, I mean, it wasn't that, or I'd be in jail. You know, but the my marching orders in my mind was to do a show like that in an amusement park for teenagers mostly that love getting on all the rides. Why the hell would they come to see a puppet show? The word puppet, you know, was never used. And if you watch me on Instagram and Kelly, you know, at the top, it always says, or she always says, the unusual artistry of Sid Krofft, and she hits the gong. Well, that's the way my act used to open, you know. And we never, my agent said, I can't sell a puppet act. So you got to come up with another, you know, byline. And so that's where that came from. But what was the question?
no, I wanted to know from Banana
Oh,
Splits.
Banana Splits.
Right.
Okay, so Six Flags, we were the #1 attraction, and there's a big story how that all happened. But anyway, they set us up right behind the Burbank Airport. We had what we called the Show Business Factory, and it was like a mini Disney operation. We had the best artists, the best craftsmen, the best everything. We only had like 250 people that worked there. And we built the rides and stuff for Six Flags, what was needed, because I became the entertainment director. I'm not the consultant looking overall of the park and their needs each season. And we never did anything like that, but we gathered the best people on the planet, you know, in California, I mean, or Hollywood. So anyway, when we would deliver the rides and stuff for Six Flags, I didn't want to let any of the people go because they were so creative. And so we opened up our doors to anyone. And the first customers that came in was Hanna-Barbera with the Banana Splits. And they wanted us to design and build, which we had done before, people in costumes, you know. And they used to come in every day, the head of programming at NBC, and said, God, you guys are insane. Why don't you come up with your own television show? And that's where HR Pufnstuf was born.
Wow.
But he came from San Antonio, the San Antonio World's Fair for the Coca-Cola Company in their pavilion. The show was called Kaleidoscope, but he was born in that show. And all those characters, or most of them, came from that show. So when his name was not Pufnstuf, you know, he had a different name, he became the symbol of the fair. He was so popular. And he didn't even look like that. He didn't have arms. He was a dragon, you know. And so that's how we got into the television business, because I got to tell you something. We knew nothing about putting on a TV show. I mean, I was in the live, you know, the live show part of show business, you know, my act, and then Les Poupées de Paris. Did you know anything about that?
Not really.
No?
Just a little bit that I read when I was researching you.
Yeah. Oh, really? Well, Les Poupées de Paris was probably the biggest production of any puppet show that played at the Seattle World's Fair, the New York World's Fair, the San Antonio World's Fair, off Broadway. It toured the country. It ended up in 9 years playing to 9.5 million people. And the gimmick was that you had to be 21 years old. It wasn't, you know, that it wasn't that it had dirty words in it or anything like that. It was like a takeoff on the Folie Bergère. It was our children watching today. It was tits and ass. That's, you know, like a Las Vegas, a Paris show. That's what it was. But it took 3 months to install each one. The stage, you know, had swimming pool, real, ice rink, waterfalls, rain, elevators, you know, all fireworks, all kinds of unbelievable effects. 250 marionettes, they were 3 feet tall in the show, and they would be mixed with little people with strings on. The audience never knew that. You know, they'd always say, "Oh my God." Yeah, you know, and they would break out of the stage, pull their strings down. The audience and the critics never, ever, was never exposed to them. They thought it was a radio controlled puppet because it would break out of the stage and walk over the orchestra pit, which was all puppets, and an elevator would take it down and it would walk up the aisle of the center of the theater, and then the audience would freak out screaming, and then we would, because it was always a big, like a Grand Guignol horror or whatever number, you know, very dark, and then I would drop the little person into a trap and up the aisle, and he would disappear. And the audience, you know, they thought he was underneath their legs or screaming. So that's where that all came from, you know. And some crazy stuff. What you said. Please don't send somebody with a straitjacket for me, okay?
Well,
that's just fantastic.
Leads to the next. I mean, I previously interviewed Mark Lester from Oliver, who spoke glowingly of Jack Wilde. How did you come to Jack Wilde for the show?
Jack Wilde. Okay, we get the order, and we hadn't cast. We didn't even know what the hell we were doing. As a matter of fact, my brother said to me, "Go to the library and get a book on television," you know. And we had an order of 17 shows, you know. And if we failed with Pufnstuf, I know we wouldn't be talking today. Because if that failed, I mean, we ended up doing 26 television series. You know, that was a lot. You know, Donnie Marie, the Brady Bunch Hour, you know, Barbara Mandrell, and it just, we went into Night and, you know, and all those crazy things. But Lionel Bart, who wrote Oliver, was a really good friend of mine, because I was in a show in London for 6 or 7 months, And Lionel Bart, the day we got the order, called me from London and said, I'm coming tomorrow to LA to see a rough cut of Oliver. I'm really nervous. And please, don't say you're busy. Please come with me. I'm so nervous about, you know. And I said, oh my God, you don't even have to, I would cancel everything because I knew that it was going to be a spectacular. I saw the script and all that. Okay, so anyway, which he wrote and wrote the music. So we go into a screening room. I think it was at Sony, or I can't remember, which studio did that movie. And we were the only two. And the movie started. And when Jack Wilde came up on the screen, I jumped up and I said, Lionel, who is this kid? And, and the movie kept going, and he was trying to concentrate. I was hysterical because I said, I want that kid. He said, well, we found him in a schoolyard. When I go back to London, I'll find him, and that's how that all happened.
Wow.
And we had him fly in, and he was staying at Marty's house. We didn't even do a screen test. We just had him come in to really see, we already had the script, the first show, and we wanted him. And Billy Hayes wasn't even cast yet, and that's another great story. Yeah. So I've been really, really lucky in casting all the shows because most of them were my friends, that I talked into doing a kid show. And every one of them said, you're going to ruin my career. I mean, that means, that's the end of my career. All of them. Martha Ray. Oh, she was a great friend of mine. I knew her a zillion years before that when I played Miami at the Vaudeville Theater downtown. It was called the Olympia, I think, something like that, and I used to play there quite a bit. And that's where I worked with Billy Barty, Spike Jones. Huh. I don't know, you guys might be too young to remember that band. They played off key, and Billy Barty was in that show. That's where I first met him. Wow. And it was Billy that found all the little people for me, and of course, he was in every one of our shows,
He was fantastic, Billy Barty.
Yeah.
All the show. You had also like Charles Nelson Riley and Lenny Weinrib.
Friend of mine. Yeah. He definitely. He said, we're never going to speak again. Don't ask. Not doing it. And I talked him into it, and he hated.
Did he?
The green makeup and the skull cap and and it became, for the rest of his life, that character became Charles Nelson Riley. When he was on the Johnny Carson and all those shows, he was doing hoodoo. He became that character. And after all those years, it still lives on, that character and our shows. I mean, for people to take them with them all these years, it's amazing to me,
Well, my daughter's a fan now. I mean, my daughter's discovering your shows now. She's 15. She watches them religiously now. So
wow, thank you. You've got to thank her for me.
She's listening in.
Is she watching?
Yes.
I mean, is she next to you?
She's right next to me.
Really, have her come on. I want to thank her.
Come here quick. Come here quick. You have to.
Oh yeah, you got to. Come on.
She's so embarrassed right now. There she is.
No, oh come on, how beautiful. Of course, everybody has to see you, and thank you so much for what. Look at what you're wearing. Does it say hoodoo?
Scooby Doo.
Oh, Scooby Doo. Oh well, let's hide that.
Okay.
I thought
Big Pufnstuf fan. So,
yeah. Oh, that's Scooby Doo. Great.
yes.
Yeah.
No, I was saying then came after that you came some of my favorites with Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, and where you had another prodigious childhood actor who I also interviewed, Johnny Whitaker.
I had him on last week.
I saw. We watched the show. We watched it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, great.
With Scott also there. So can you tell us a little bit about how that casting came with Johnny?
Johnny, let me see. There was Pufnstuf, and then came the Bugaloos, which we went back to London and auditioned. And guess who picked the Bugaloos? Mick Jagger, who was a very close friend of Lionel, because Lionel Bart was, as we were auditioning, we auditioned over 4,000 kids for the Bugaloos in London in February, and I used to bring hot chocolate out. They were waiting for hours in the cold to come and audition. It just tore me apart. I hate being part of that because, rejection for all of us, and especially in our business, it hurts, and we don't know why. We think we do well, and you go in for a part or whatever, but you never know what they're really looking for. They don't tell you, so
it's so very true. Very true.
Yeah. And it always tears me apart when we audition, because they want the part so badly for so many reasons, and they work so hard in getting there. So, okay. And then came
at Lidsville,
and that, okay, even Butch Patrick, I did not pick him. It was Cy Rose, who was our producer, who came to me and said, "What do you think of Butch Patrick?" And I said, "Wow, I don't know him, but the Munsters, he would be perfect. But how old is he now?" And we looked it up, and he was like 17 or 18. And I said, "Well, let's see what he looks like, because it's got to be a younger kid, And he came in, his agent sent him in, and he really thought the whole thing was stupid, Lidsville. And he really didn't want to do it. And so I asked him, I think he told that story a couple of weeks ago. I took him out and we had lunch, and I talked him into it,
Wow.
You got it. It's called a snow job, isn't it? Yeah, isn't it? So, and then he really hated doing that show, but then because it became like, oh my God! I mean, to this day, everybody that's a fan of our shows, that's like one of their favorite shows, because it was so, I'm working with David Copperfield, and every time I talk to him, he says, "The cuckoo is." He knows all the words. He grew up with all, I wrote the theme song, I wrote the music, the lyrics, and Les Sarvis, who wrote the theme song of Pufnstuf, we both worked together on Lidsville.
Wow. Well, we're going to have to pause part one of our interview with Sid Krofft. We can't wait to hear more about the music on the shows and much more. So please join us next time, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.
So please join us next time, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.